Well, thank you to Paul for sending me this so that I could introduce Brian like we're best friends. I hope to be at the end of the evening. Brian Stubbs taught English and linguistics at the College of Eastern Utah, San Juan campus. He earned a master's in linguistics from the University of Utah. His PhD in Hebrew and other Semitic equal 3 dissertations. His books, Morsels for the Mind and Changes in Language from Nephi to Now, offer informational and thinking skills challenges that are to be highly recommended in this forum. He's among the leading publishers of articles on the Uto-Aztecan language family in linguistics journals. Brian and his wife, Sylvia Stubbs, are parents of 5 children. He returns to update his research on the fascicular cognates, I hope I said that right, tying Semitic to Uto-Aztecan language families, and this evening to the Choctaw. Please welcome him, a linguistic pioneer genius, Brian Stubbs. And then we're going to go on to our prayer for the evening. So if you'll bow your heads and pray together. Creator of the echoes through which we apprehend the word, whose voice resonates through the multiverse, its thunders, its whispers, through spiritual vibrancy to be heard, whose spirit calls us together on this Book of Mormon Perspectives Forum on Zoom this eve, to explore, examine the roots of meaning and how words become so central to what we believe. We affirm our belief in you, dear God, awesome creator that you are, and join our thinking skills together in an exercise to explore the depths of word meaning, and especially the words of your Son, Jesus the Christ, our superstar. We do so in a world divided by politics, greed, racism, and war, with crises today in Ukraine, Gaza, Myanmar, Sudan, Haiti, with hunger, freedom, issues that cut to our human mortal core. And as we move our focus from the pain on earth to the joy that you invite us to embrace, to share, to be, we recognize how fortunate we are to have this opportunity to learn, to share, to greet each other in appreciation of the sonder, the indwelling of the divine in each person you invite us to see. So we ask you for your blessing, that patience, kindness, and understanding will be conferred as we are led by Brother Stubbs in his remarkable exploration of the ties across the cultures and the echoes of your word. In the name of the Holy One, the voice of the heavens, Jesus Christ, your Son. Amen.
Thank you. You want me to dive in now?
You bet.
Share the screen and y'all tell me if that works. Can you see it okay? Okay, yeah, this will not be a long presentation, which is good. It'll give you plenty of time for questions. Most of you, or some of you, I should say, have the second edition. Changes in Languages from Nephi to Now is there is the cover of the second edition. In fact, I'll just read these and maybe comment additionally if I need to. To the left is a picture of the cover of the second edition. The third edition, to be, is now only in electronic form. I have a PDF, but it's the latest and most updated as I work on it. I would be happy to forward the PDF, the electronic copy of the book, to anyone who wants the latest edition of this book. Email me at Rhodes Scholar BDS, those are my initials, at gmail.com. Now, this email, I'll also put it right at the end and just leave it so you can copy it down. So if you don't get it now, it's no problem. We might just, let me just tell a little bit about the book. I'm going to skip up here to slide number 10. My first published book in Uto-Aztecan was this one on the left. Uto-Aztecan, a comparative vocabulary. It was huge. It took 30 years. It's a big, thick thing, about 500,000 words. It has all the cognate sets of Uto-Aztecan that I had discovered to that date, and all of the linguists working on Uto-Aztecan really liked it, and it got good reviews in the journals, and so it was valued by all Uto-Aztecan scholars or linguists who had worked on the language family. Here on the right is exploring the explanatory power of Semitic and Egyptian in Uto-Aztecan, and that established how Uto-Aztecan has a whole bunch of Hebrew, Aramaic, and Egyptian vocabulary in it. And the Uto-Aztecan specialists were not nearly as excited about that one, for obvious reasons. But and so this third book, or this changes in languages from Nephi to now, what it does is it takes both of those that I showed previously just now were monstrous, huge reference books establishing two different things. This one simply quotes from those or cites data, brings in some of the data from those, about 5% of the data, to make the case or to explain how it is relevant to the Book of Mormon. And we've already talked about that a time or two, so we don't need to go over that a lot. But this third edition, what I'm going to do is just kind of highlight a few things that make it a little bit different from the first and second edition. First of all, looking at the table of contents, it only has 12 chapters. First is an introduction. Then it goes through a lot of evidences for the Book of Mormon. As you can see, Adu, Nahum, horses, Hagoth, Hebraisms, Ezekiel, Daniel, Isaiah. Chapter 3 is on the male names of Lehi's family and Arabia, and that's also another set of interesting evidences, very powerful supports of the authenticity of the text. Chapter
Brian,
4,
would you accept the
Lehi's,
interruption?
and yes.
Because last week we had the presentation by Mark Hensley on horses. If you would expand upon that a little bit for us to understand any corollary you have?
Actually, there's not really, but what I talk about in that chapter, or the paragraph on horses, is not really evidence for horses, but it shows how horses among the, who was it, the Huns, a culture in Asia that used horses all the time. I mean, they lived on horses, they fought on horses, they traveled on horses. They were a horse people, and they can't find any of the bones or archaeological leftovers of the Huns horses. And so the only point I'm making there is that, hey, not finding bones of horses doesn't mean there were not horses. So that one's a rather short one. That list of words is just a sample of a bunch of stuff covered. And then chapter 4, Lehi's and Nephi's languages, the former discussions, what LDS scholars have said about their languages simply from statements in the text and what they think they know about Hebrew and Egyptian. But not really a whole bunch more can be figured out if you find languages descended from the Book of Mormon peoples. And that's what chapter 5 is about. Lehi's and Nephi's Semitic and Egyptian as evident in Uto-Aztecan, and that brings in the data, the words, the lexical proof of lots of Semitic and Egyptian in the Uto-Aztecan language family. Alma's language after the Nephite and Mulekite merger or mix. What I found is that Uto-Aztecan happens to be descended from the Nephite Mulekite merger. It's not a Lamanite language, and it has the two mixed together, which really tells us excuse me, a lot of interesting things about both of their languages. And then excuse me. Chapter 8, some thoughts on Mormon and Moroni's language dilemma. It's a lot more perplexing than most people assume, but when you think about the matter linguistically and a little more insight into language, it was quite a dilemma. But yeah, let me spend a chapter on that. Assimilation of Book of Mormon names takes a number of Book of Mormon names and explains what is happening in the languages with names. Chapter 10 is on DNA and language, or as yeah, and we're gonna quote a little bit from that. Chapter 11, a word on geography. It's not, this book is not really about geography, but hey, since it's on the Book of Mormon, there are a few things that might be said about geography, and we're gonna summarize that too. Conclusions, yes, we have a paragraph, a large paragraph in that chapter that we'll read. Then I have just about as many appendices as chapters. Spellbound deals with the complexity of spelling in languages. Appendix B, the subconscious mind's role in language acquisition. Yeah, that's very important because it shows how languages change in grammar. And then C is an introduction to linguistics or language science for those who want to be able to understand the data better. That's chapters 4, 5, and chapters 5, 6, and 7 are data heavy chapters with all the language data and so forth. Appendix F, G, and let's see, F, yeah, the sound correspondences, we just summarize those after we talk about them in the chapters. G, H, and I deal with language mixing and mixing of peoples and all the complexities of that. And then about the author, Appendix J. And so, yeah, here is the opening paragraph of the book. Believers and non-believers have both assembled their separate sets of misconceptions about the Book of Mormon. So as truth emerges, everyone gets to be surprised in some ways, myself included. Every science or discipline has its knowns and unknowns, and while progress regularly enlarges the knowns, the remaining unknowns do not negate the reality of what has been confirmed in any field. Yeah, a lot of people are talking about, well, there's not proof of this, there's not proof of that. Yeah, well, when there is proof of about 200 things, but we don't have proof yet of 50 things, we should just not worry about it. That lack of a few things does not negate the correlation of hundreds of things. Let's see, where was I? Likewise, for the Book of Mormon, unknowns hardly detract from a growing number of remarkable alignments. In fact, the evidences for the Book of Mormon have grown to rather overwhelming proportions, though most people are unaware, while the arguments against continue to dwindle and be dismantled. Another paragraph from the first chapter. I think this might be page 2 or 3. It's a little further down. One of the great fallacies afield about the Book of Mormon is the condescending attempt to label as gullible anyone who believes Joseph Smith's account. Yet gullible may better describe those accepting the fictions about the book than those digging in to find the facts. Those who dive in to get all the available facts find an ever-widening imbalance of more and more for and less viable libel. The Book of Mormon's claim of emergence by angelic assistance and being translated by the gift and power of God are the most frequent objections, and do make it a case of all or nothing. It must either be of God or a fraud. There is no middle ground. In such a quandary, God does not want us to be gullible, but to be thinkers. Yet few choose to read, seek, and think. Most people whimsically assume that its popular portrayal as preposterous is probable and dismiss it without having sought and thought. Assuming that the book is false without investigating it simply because most of the world assumes so makes which group gullible? Yeah, those who are believing the world without checking it out are the ones who are really gullible. In fact, And then then a lot of interesting stuff in chapters 2 and 3, evidences for the Book of Mormon. A lot of language ones. I mean, mostly they are language ones, but it touches on other things. At the end of chapter 4, these first 4 chapters are lay reader friendly. You know, I mean, they're for lay readers. Chapters 5, 6, and 7 have the language data that I mentioned before. And so I kind of give a little caution here. The language details of chapters 5, 6, and 7 are the foundation of many conclusions. What seems apparent about Nephi's and Mulek's and Alma's languages, all very different from each other, is based on the Uto-Aztecan data in those chapters, which detail is abbreviated from the fuller book. That's the Exploring the Explanatory Power of Semitic and Egyptian, which is first edition was 2015, the second edition 2023. Nevertheless, if language detail makes one uncomfortable, dizzy, or nauseous, one can skip the detail in chapters 5, 6, and 7 and simply enjoy the thoughts and conclusions in the other 9 chapters of the lay reader friendly book. Yeah, so be sure and enjoy reading it, even if you have to skip the parts that seem hard. And chapter 5 starts the language data. We have a new chapter in the third edition, or what will be the third edition, a little more complete. It shows more of the languages. It shows several of the Nawa or Aztecan languages down here. I can't remember, 12 or 15 of them. In the southwest United States and along the west coast of Mexico, and then scattered throughout southern Mexico and into Guatemala and Nicaragua even. Okay, 6 works have addressed all the known cognate sets since Edward Sapir, since his founding work a century plus ago. 1915. The number of cognate sets is included. Okay, Edward Sapir, he put together the first one. He's the one that really proved Uto-Aztecan as a language family. A few others had said, yeah, I think so. I'll bet it is. But he's the one that put together the data and said, yes, here's the evidence that Southern Paiute in Utah and Nahua down in Mexico are related, and he brings in all the other languages, a lot of other languages, show that this is a language family. That established Uto-Aztecan a little over 100 years ago. One interesting fact about this is his articles were 1913 or 1915. And my book, showing its connection to Hebrew and Egyptian, was published in 2015, exactly 100 years later. I mean, I didn't plan it that way. It just kind of turned out that way. Vogelin, and Hale, they produced the second book on Uto-Aztecan cognate sets in 1962, about 45 years later, with 171 cognate sets. Wick Miller, my professor at University of Utah, he then produced a book called Uto-Aztecan cognate sets, and then that in 1967, just 5 years later, and in that there are 514 cognate sets. He continued working on Uto-Aztecan and gathering more cognate sets and discovering more stuff, and he kept it on a computer file. He never really published it, but all the Uto-Aztecanists, they went to that file and it was shared, and he sent it to whoever wanted it. And that was kind of the running list or increase, the additional cognate sets that were being put down. And that had 1,100 cognate sets. In 1988 is the last that he produced of that. He died, he was killed in an accident in Mexico while he was researching. He was riding a bicycle and got hit by a car, a traffic accident. Not too long after that, Kenneth Hill, another great Uto-Aztecanist, continued that. He took Miller's 1,100 cognate sets and revised it and added to it, expanded. And by then there were about something over 1,200 sets. And I had started I was one of Wick Miller's students, graduate students at the University of Utah when I was getting a master's in linguistics. And so I was looking into this, and I was collecting my own list. And finally, after, I went to U of U 1980. So this is like 30 years later. I published Uto-Aztecan, a comparative vocabulary, in 2011, 30 years after I was at U of U, with 2,700 sets. Notice that that's more than double of the last corpus of cognate sets in Uto-Aztecan. That's why all the Uto-Aztecan specialists and linguists loved it. Oh, this is a wealth of wonderful information. Everybody spoke highly of it until I published the book that connected it and it just showed how much Semitic and Egyptian are in it. Then they weren't nearly as excited about that, but they still like me. We get along. And we did this before in the other two presentations, listed lots of words. So this is just a sample of, and there are 1,658 sets that descend from Hebrew, Aramaic, or Egyptian. And here we just show 7 of them here, showing the sound change, B changing to P. And Barak, Berok, Bet, Bete, Itu, Batu, Bo, Ho, Bat, Bata, Besar, Pisa, or Pisa, Baka, Baka. So anyway, yeah, lots of, it's only 7. There are 1,650 more of such parallels. And just to put it in context a little bit, I took a paragraph out of chapter 5. After Sapir in 13 and 15, established Uto-Aztecan as a viable family of cognate sets, and Hale, Vogel and Hale, produced the first number set of 171 cognate sets. Those are groups of related words, cognate sets. Clar, her last name, in 1977, did the work on Chumash, the language family, and she produced 168 sets that established that language family. And then Taylor, 1963, he put together 107 cognate sets that established the Caddoan language family in the Central Plains. And Hale, he put together the work that proved Kiowa-Tanoan language family to be a group of related languages with 99 sets. Okay, so basically what we're saying here is that all of these people actually established language families with between 200 and about 75 sets. Whereas the book that I produced, showing a tie to Semitic and Egyptian, has 1,658 sets. I mean, about 10 times what all of these are that founded a language family. So that's really strong evidence. Okay, chapter 10 on DNA. I rather than quote a whole bunch from the other chapters, we're kind of highlighting stuff, and you can get the book for free and read the whole thing, and we could have another question and answer period in 6 months after whoever's read it wants to. Anyway, besides strong language evidence of a Uto-Aztecan tie to the Near East, some DNA evidence suggests the same. The DNA parallels between Arabs and Uto-Aztecan peoples have been published in 4 different publications: Cavalli et al., Guthrie, Jett, and Leonard. And there's a footnote in there that shows the fuller notes of those. They note various human lymphocyte antigens rates shared by Arabs and Uto-Aztecan peoples. For example, B21 was not found in most of indigenous America, was negligibly found near 1% in India, Japan, China, Mongolia, Malaysia, Cambodia, the Philippines. In other words, all of those Asian countries where Native Americans are supposed to have come from. And it was not found in Australia, nor Micronesia, nor in most of the rest of Asia. However, 11 of the 12 areas of highest occurrence, okay, these are the 12 places in the world that have the highest occurrence of B21, and they're between 22% and 7%. Remember, all these others have either 0% or 1% that we named, but 12 places have the most where that has the most is between 22 and 7% are 12 different groups. And 8 of those 12 are Arab groups, and 3 of the 12 are Uto-Aztecan peoples. That's amazing. In addition, both groups also share B17 and B37. Arabs are much the same gene pool as ancient Israel. Anyway, that is very interesting DNA evidence, but it never gets talked about. Okay, let's see. Similarly, the Native Americans' East Asian DNA is but one source of ancestry, among others yet to be clarified. Even if, the what you always hear is that Native American DNA is 99% from Asia. Well, it might be true that 99% of Native Americans have Asian DNA in them, but 80% of them might also have Lehite DNA, or 80% may also have Jaredite lineage. In other words, just because a lot of them have that one, yeah, all peoples are mixtures. I mean, I have about a dozen ethnic groups in my ancestry, and most people it's similar. And so just because one of the ancestral lines of whatever Native American group is from Asia doesn't mean that there are not a whole bunch of other ancestral lines from other groups like Lehi or Jared or who knows what. We know that a lot of people came to the Americas, a lot of different language families, not related to each other. So a lot of people came, which simply means that a lot of more people are here than Lehi, but there's certainly evidence of Lehi in its strongest in Uto-Aztecan as far as language is concerned. Let's see, I better quit talking so much and just read. Each Native American would have several of all possible strands, if not most of them. Like I and my children have a dozen kinds of ancestry too. Matthew Roper cites Steve Olson in that the amount of DNA each of us gets from one of our 1,024 ancestors 10 generations back. Yeah, just 10 generations back, which is about 350 years, AD 1700. We each have 1,024 ancestors on our pedigree chart. Now, some of those might be the same people if you go back into a smaller village or whatever. Nevertheless, there are 1,024 slots. If that is true of one's, let's see, I skipped some. Going back a little bit, the amount of DNA each of us gets from any one of our 1,024 ancestors 10 generations back, about 1,700, is minuscule, and we might not get any DNA from that person. Okay, if that is true of one's 1,024 ancestors alive AD 1700, how much less is perceptible of the millions of ancestors alive about 600 BC? So in bigender lines, all the millions except 2, the DNA identifiability gets murky not very far back. So even if we cannot positively identify Lehite DNA yet, that does not mean that Lehi is not thoroughly infused through much of the Americas. Chapter 11, a word on geography. Okay, this paragraph is not from chapter 11, but it summarizes it. Geographic theories regarding Book of Mormon lands are not the focus of this book, nor my pressing interest. I am interested, but I decided to let language point to what it will say for us, which no one else has done. Everybody else looks at geology and archaeology and so forth. My interest was investigating American languages throughout North and South America and see what we could find. After 40 years of research, I find Uto-Aztecan strongest, with 60 to 90% of its vocabulary being from Hebrew, Aramaic, and Egyptian, and a few others, only 8 or 10, out of 190 different language families in the Americas, with much lesser amounts, possibly 10 to 15%, but of the same Lehite language, pieces, words. One in the eastern U.S., which, could very well connect into the Hopewell stuff, and a half dozen in northern South America. Those are really interesting and need to be looked into more. That general picture and other language details suggest some things and point to somewhere in Middle America as a starting point. This chapter touches on probabilities, but offers few definite answers. But yeah, the Hopewell people, I'm all in favor of them continuing their research because Nephites did get up there, even though I think they started in the Middle America somewhere, as Uto-Aztecan suggests that Uto-Aztecan is by far the strongest. If we look at this, Uto-Aztecan, I think, are descended from those who launched into the West Sea and sailed to the land northward and landed various places. All of these people, the northern half of Uto-Aztecan, spread out from the Los Angeles area, a very natural harbor. And then the other places they probably landed are along here. And then who knows, the original might have been around in there somewhere. The Muskogean language family, which we talked about last time, goes up the east coast of the United States, and you hit the main river systems. You got to have fresh water to live, and so most native peoples stay close to fresh water river systems, and that's and so the Hopewell, interesting. They are they have Lehigh mixed into a whole bunch of other stuff, and the Muskogean has the best language evidence in the southeast United States. Let's see, I kind of lost where I was. Where was I here? Yeah, I gotta go back away. So here we are. And then in the northern South America, there's a number of interesting languages, but again, not just purely or all of Lehigh, but have these interesting infusions mixed in. Okay, yeah, we read that. Okay, this is my favorite paragraph of the whole book. It took me about a half a day, 4 or 5 hours to write this one paragraph. In fact, it's long enough that it takes 2 slides. So I want to read this paragraph. This is the concluding paragraph of the book, the last paragraph of chapter 12. In conclusion, the internet is multiplying misleading messages at the speed of light. Yet if one digs to get the big picture of all the available information, the Book of Mormon is largely proven. There are so many things aligning with it, and I can't really even think of one strong argument against it that holds water. But hundreds, if not thousands, align with it. It's in my mind, it's proven basically on the evidence alone, on the circumstantial and physical and linguistic and other kinds of evidence alone. But yeah, witnesses of the Spirit are indispensable. But letting misinformation mislead the masses without setting the record straight is inexcusable. Academicians supposedly encourage open-minded, independent thought or critical thinking, yet they often construe critical thinking to mean rethinking the value system of one's upbringing, apparently confident that students will see the light and be liberated from the presumed mythologies of religion or traditional values. But academics' responses are less than enthusiastic should such an investigation confirm what they were sure could not be so. When evidence is presented to suggest conclusions outside their paradigms, such as Semitic speakers in ancient America or support for the Book of Mormon, many of their reactions show their paradigms to be as dogmatic as they thought religious ones are. Academicians claim to be open-minded seekers of truth, and minus a few duped by reality-challenged philosophers deeming truth to be ever relative or non-existent, the rest of us should work toward it. As for language evidence, keep in mind, as if 1,658 matches were not enough, that there is another way to know whether the Uto-Aztecan case is valid or not. If it be truth, then that is only the beginning of findings, whether in Uto-Aztecan or other language families. Likewise, if the Book of Mormon is true, then the findings consistent with those truths have only begun to be amassed. The gap between much more for and dwindling hopes against will only grow greater. The balance's steep lean between lightweight straw men and the eternal weightier substance of the gold plates will grow to be ever more obvious. And that's the concluding paragraph. But hey, I think I already told you this, the appendices and what they're about. Also at the end of the at the end of the PDF are the endorsements that were on the back of the second edition, and will also be on the back of the third edition. In fact, one more endorsement. Um, there are now 4 endorsements. I think there are only 3 on the back. I'm not going to read them all. You can read them when you get it. But I'll just tell you who they are. John Robertson, he got his PhD from Harvard in historical linguistics. He's a retired professor and chair of the BOM linguistics department and a prominent Mayan scholar. He is the church's best historical linguist. Noel B. Reynolds, also a Harvard PhD. He's a retired professor and was vice president of BYU and is also a notable Book of Mormon scholar. David Calabro, he's probably the church's best Semitic Egyptian combination. He knows Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic, and Egyptian all really well. He knows all of them better than I do. And my PhD is in, and so he is really good. And he gave this endorsement. The new one added is Donald W. Perry. He's a professor of Hebrew, and he's also internationally recognized as a scholar of the Isaiah Scrolls and the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah, he's one of the top scholars reading, translating, and dealing with the Dead Sea Scrolls. He's also a BYU Hebrew professor. And then I just took out some from the montage of Amazon customer reviews. Spellbinding, a fantastic little book, a real treat to read. I bought this book to read just the conclusions and M on my third reading. Very original and important work, fascinating study, intriguing. I highly recommend this book, a montage of Amazon customer reviews. And there at the bottom is, again, my email address. All you have to do is email me, say, hey, yes, I'd like a copy of the PDF, and I'll email you back a copy of that. I might just explain this email address. It's not Rhodes Scholar as in RHODES, but just a regular road. And where that kind of came from is down here in San Juan County. We live in the boonies, and in past years, decades, I would walk the mountain roads with a bag of books or rough drafts and study material, and people would see me walking in the mountains, studying books or working on a draft of an article, or sometimes even correcting student papers. And so I kind of got labeled the Rhodes Scholar that's always walking the mountain roads. So yeah, 2 S's there. A lot of people get hung up on that. ROADS, that ends Rhodes, and then Scholar, the next S for Scholar, and then those are my initials. Brian Darrell Stubbs. BDS are my initials. Anyway, yeah, that I'll just leave that last thing up there if you want to copy down that email address. That's the last frame. Any questions?
Yes, of course there's questions. I'm so pleased to have you on the forum. Let me check, make sure I'm muted or not muted and being heard.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, fine. I do want to thank you again for the lifetime of work and effort you've put into this study that so few people can really appreciate. I read about Dr. Sapir when I was doing my college work and appreciated his efforts to try to get linguistics into a professional field, but I never took enough courses in linguistics to qualify as one myself. But then I certainly can appreciate that what you had done, what you're doing, is a marvelous revelation of the obscure truths hiding in the fascicular cognates. And yes, Pat, you did pronounce fascicular cognates correctly, because those are basically fossils. They're word fossils. We have so much of the scripture that tells us about the significance of the word. And when you can find the fascicular words that are tied back to the meaningful social context, religious context of the book. To me, it is compelling evidence, and so I definitely agree that what you're showing on the fossils of the language is beautiful of evidence of the merits of the Book of Mormon. I did want to get one comment in because you mentioned something that struck me, that that 10 generations, you estimate that 350 years, and that's enough time to have our DNA get well, yeah. I'm sort of pleased to have had the birth of another great grandson last week, but it doesn't take very long before our DNA gets pretty thoroughly diluted, and at the same time, we like to be pretty proud that we had at least a little bit of a contribution there. But when you talk about 10 generations and see that you are one of more than 1,000 ancestors, then clearly that's a comparatively small amount. When Bent Danielson, who was on the Kontiki expedition, landed on the island of Rotorua, that's where the Kontiki crashed, and so he went back to Rotorua to study and do his ethnographic study there. And in the process, he wrote down 30 generations of the memories of the people of Rotorua according to their oral history. And since I married somebody out of that family, it included her history. And so interesting that civilized people like to think that our written histories are so awfully significant. But here, this Pacific island in the Tuamotu archipelago, he said not only did he write down the 30 generations, but they had 70 generations that the knowledgeable people could recite.
Huh?
If 30 if 30 generations is going to take us back 1,000 years. So
Yeah.
70
Yeah,
generations is
it's
going to take more than 2,000 years.
and of course from oldest to oldest would be, you put 5 or 6 generations in a century, youngest to youngest and youngest, so it varies widely. Just like we know a lot of people, all of you know a lot of people whose uh, oldest grandchild is about the same age as their youngest child. So hey, it varies,
Well,
but yeah,
it's so highly
it's a rough estimate
significant.
of about 25 years per generation, maybe.
Yeah. So it's fascinating that when you start looking at those figures, then that's how dilute the DNA actually becomes from an individual. Um, there certainly would be the extension of the mitochondrial DNA to the mother because that does continue it. But you raise a very interesting point, and thank you again, Brian, for being available and sharing with us. And thank you so much more for the fantastic work you've done. I applaud you, and I hope everybody will pick up the book and read it because I've just found it worth immersing myself in.
Thank you. So everybody got that emailed address down? I'll
I think
well,
so.
maybe I'll leave it up here instead of stop share in case everybody has a
Brian,
question.
you could put it in the chats and then everybody could get it there.
We have 3 hands raised, so we'll go ahead
Okay.
then with Ron Smith.
Yes, Brian, I really appreciate, whoops, yeah, I'm on. I really appreciated the work that you put into that. I have a nephew who is into that area. Um, and he had talked about your work too. Um, I was one of the things that you mentioned, but didn't elaborate on, was the dilemma that the writers of the Book of Mormon had in the language, and like, could you elaborate on that a little bit? The the difficulty that they had with the language and how you see that.
Yeah, the one of the difficulties is that the languages change over time. For example, English. We cannot read Old English of 1,000 years ago unless we study it like a foreign language. In other words, English has
Right.
changed so much in the last 1,000 years that we can't read it. It's like a foreign language to us unless we study it. And it'd be the same thing with Lehi and Nephi's language. One thing that makes languages change fast is when they are in contact with another people speaking another language. For example, English changed really fast while the French ruled England. It became a lot like French. It changed the grammar. We borrowed lots of words. We only kept about 15% of our Old English vocabulary, and the other 85% was replaced by French or Latin or other words. And so that intense contact changed it fast. And in the Americas, especially in Mesoamerica, where we have lots of different languages and language families unrelated, it would cause things to change fast. And so, so by Alma's time, for example, 500 years after Lehi, a person to understand the brass plates would have to have an education. They'd have to be taught and study it. It's a foreign language to them. And in fact, Alma's language would be a mix of what we find in Euro-Aztecan is that the Mulekite language mixed with the Nephite language, and that Nephite language became a mix of about 3/4 Nephite and 1/4 Mulekite. So it was a new language situation that everybody growing up would learn, and they'd have to, that made it even harder to read Lehi's and Nephi's writings or any of the previous apostles further or prophet scriptorians further back. And then we get to Mormon and Moroni 1,000 years after Lehi and Nephi, and they would have to be dealing with Lehi and Nephi's Semitic, Lehi and Nephi's Egyptian, and the various stages of it through the records, which were gradually changing. In fact, they say, you know, that our manner of speech changed over the years. And so it would be kind of like taking a sharp high school kid and giving him some records in Old English and Old French and moderate and various stages of English and French in between, you know, probably equivalent to like 3 or 4 or 5 languages, and telling him, hey, can you summarize these records for us? And that's one of the dilemmas that Mormon and Moroni were up against.
Okay, I really appreciate that. I had a teacher as a senior in high school. We moved to Canada, and he loved Chaucer, and so he would quote from Chaucer in Chaucer's language, and
Yeah,
I can really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
you're welcome. See, Boyd, is that who is up next?
Boyd, go ahead.
Hey, Brian, that was really good presentations. The chapter 7 in your book, you get into the language difference between Lehi and the Lehi's group and the Mulekites. Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Okay, yeah, the two languages changed in different ways. All languages change with time. Nobody can stop it, you know, as hard as they try. The languages simply change. Sometimes more slowly if they're isolated, like Icelandic out in the Atlantic. It changed very slowly, so slowly that Icelandic now is almost like Old Norse, whereas other languages usually change more quickly, and some very rapidly when they're in intense contact. And so, yeah, it depends on the situation, but they're all always changing. And so Lehi's language and Mulek's language changed in different directions, so that when they came together, they could not understand each other. And this melding of their languages did not make both of them the same. What they did is take words from one, mainly taking a few, some of their words from Mulekite, and putting into the Nephite mixture. And so it's a kind of a mix of words from the two languages, but yeah, they became very different, and the evidence in Uto-Aztecan shows how they changed and shows that Mulekite was more Phoenician-like than Hebrew-like, and that Nephite was more Aramaic-like than Hebrew-like. And so there's a lot of interesting stuff we can learn yet. In fact, I probably had to do a study on that and write another book just to go into more detail of what these original languages looked like.
Now, these two languages, assumingly, they would have started the same because both of
Yeah,
them start in Jerusalem, right?
that's what everybody assumes, and that's going back to the first sentence of the book. You know, we construct our various conceptions about what the Book of Mormon is, and then but we as knowledge comes, we find out that all of us are surprised in some ways, myself included. One of the ways I was surprised is to find out that Lehi's language was mostly Aramaic, and also surprised that Mulek's language was mostly Phoenician. So those are actually quite different languages. So we assume that they're both speaking Hebrew because they came out of Jerusalem, but it appears that Mulek's group must have come on a Phoenician vessel, and there might have been a majority of Phoenicians on board, which has caused their sound changes to be like Phoenician instead of Israeli Semitic. In fact, the yeah, because there's a lot of stuff in the Mulekite segment of Uto-Aztecan that is more like Phoenician than Hebrew. And yeah, and it explains a lot in the book. Yeah, just give me your email and I'll send you a copy and you can read all about it.
Well, I got the book.
Oh, you got the
I'm
book.
still
Okay.
working. Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. That helped a lot. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Let's go ahead with Val.
Well, thanks for all the work you've done, Brian. It's really impressive. I think actually, short of digging up gold records or other kinds of records written in some sort of Reformed Egyptian, this is about the strongest kind of evidence one can get. It's stronger than most the archaeological stuff can be, most of it. I think what you probably show pretty conclusively is that Uto-Aztecans have roots in Egypt and the Middle East. It doesn't automatically follow that they're Book of Mormon people, but the point you just made about that mixture of Phoenician and Aramaic is actually really an extra dose of convergence with the Book of Mormon. That particular detail was very strong. I think I've asked you this before when you made a different presentation, but I don't remember the answer. Is Uto-Aztecan? Well, let me preface by saying this. Lots of languages have influences, like English, as you said, is hugely influenced by French, but we can tell that it was originally a Germanic language because the most basic type words are Germanic, even though a larger part of our vocabulary comes out of Latin and French. So my question is Uto-Aztecan, do you have evidence that the base language there is something like Aramaic or Hebrew, and the other influences that came in are on the more peripheral words? So when you go to the core vocabulary that tends to not change, is less likely to change across time, and characterize the original roots of a language, do you find the Aramaic there, or was there some other base language that was and then brought in a lot of vocabulary from Aramaic?
Good question. Yeah, the Nephite language is the most prominent in that mix, and yeah, Aramaic very heavily so. In fact, for example, the word for arm in Uto-Aztecan, seka, that's really interesting because it comes from the Hebrew and Aramaic, and of course those two languages are fairly closely related and sometimes often have the same word, even though the vowelings are a little bit different. But the word for shoulder in Hebrew is Shechem, And when it has a suffix, it's shikmo, for example, if it's his shoulder, shikmo, shikmi, if it's my shoulder. So it's a she with an E and a KM with no vowel between the second and third consonants. And so there are different vowelings for that, but in Samaritan, Aramaic, the vowelling is seka. It's exactly like Uto-Aztecan. And we have a number of words in Uto-Aztecan whose vowelling fits northern Israel, where northern Israel actually was. Also, you're right that a connection with Semitic and Egyptian wouldn't necessarily guarantee that it's a Book of Mormon people. However, another article coming out soon that I'm publishing with BYU, they asked me to put in a chapter in a book on the Book of Mormon. And in that chapter, I'm adding a new concept and idea and section where we actually see the word Nephite, Nephi, Nephiim. We actually see Hebrew forms of Nephite or Nephites in about 4 or 5 of the Uto-Aztecan tribes, either calling themselves that, or it's one of the kin terms. And so, yeah, there's some interesting evidence to really nail it down to Nephites.
Well, again, about the question about the base language. So like in English, the be verb and the most commonly used verbs are Germanic, but there's actually a larger number of words that are French or Latin. Do you find that? So I'm asking about, is the base language of Uto-Aztecan the Nephite language? That was the root.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the base language. Yeah, most of it is I mean, the body parts, nouns of nature, rock, animals, sky.
So the more common,
most of it is Nephite.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
And thanks for the great work you've done. I really think this is an extraordinary piece of scholarship that ought to be more widely known.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. It needs to be more widely known.
Keith, we have your question. I see your hand, but I've got. Oh no, you're up now. You just moved.
Hey, Jerry.
No, it's Jerry Grover's next, and then you're next, Keith.
Hi, Jerry.
You're muted, Jerry. Oh, there you go.
Jerry Grover, by the way, is the one who sponsored first edition of the Exploring the Explanatory Power of Semitic and Egyptian in Uto-Aztecan.
Oh.
Yeah, I want to comment. I mean, I do have a question, but on my website, we've got pretty much a page dedicated to Brian. So all of his works are for free to download there, except for the smaller, the little book that he's talking about. So if anyone's interested, even the cognate books, all the academic stuff, not just limited to in that. I guess kind of following up a little bit on the base language. I mean, it's called an infusion. It's not a Creole, right? It's an infusion into the Uto-Aztecan language family. So do you see anywhere, and I don't know whether they've figured out which language is the oldest in the Uto-Aztecan, maybe has the oldest branch. Do you see like any time horizon, like one language has more than the other?
What it appears is that when the Mulekites and Nephites mixed, and the ratio of their languages is about 3/4 Nephite, 1/4 Mulekite. It was kind of like a Creole. I mean, it was a mixture, but Proto-Uto-Aztecan seems to be that very mixture in who was it, Mosiah's time or whenever. And yeah, most of it comes from Lehi. There's a lot of stuff. And as far as age, glottochronology doesn't really work. And so, but it came together about the same time. But we do find some old things in both the Mulekite and Nephite. For example, Mulekite, the plural suffix in Hebrew is im, a long vowel with m at the end, im. But linguists know that that comes from an earlier ima with a short a on the end. Well, that's exactly what we have in Uto-Aztecan is ima. Now that ima is in some of the northern Phoenician languages like Ugaritic and probably Sidonian, it's Sidon or Sidon. The fact that the Mulekites named their river Sidon, that suggests a Mulekite connection, because if they were if they were mostly Israelites, or the majority were Israelites, they'd name it Jordan or something else, probably not Sidon. But and then in the Nephite side, you've got some sound changes that show really old Aramaic. We know from what Proto-Semitic looked like, and we know what our earliest forms of Aramaic looked like. And what we have in Uto-Aztecan is between the two. It's got pronunciations older than anything in written Aramaic, and the older toward Proto-Semitic sounds. So there's a lot of interesting old stuff in both of those contributions to the language mix that became the Nephite Mulekite mixture.
Because one thing is, I mean, I guess kind of always the question I have is, you have the Nephites coming in, they're incorporating locals to some extent. I mean, you kind of see that relation, but they're separate from the Mulek peoples or Hemla, for 400 or 500 years, and the Mulek presumably the same, intermixing.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of, how do you? Is there any way to even ferret that out from?
Yeah, there's some interesting things in Uto-Aztecan that are not Semitic or Egyptian that would have been influences from the surrounding Native American languages. For example, in Uto-Aztecan, there is some pairs of verbs where one is used for singular and an entirely different word used for plural. Now, Semitic doesn't do that, nor Egyptian, but a lot of Native American languages do. And so that's something in Uto-Aztecan that was an influence from a Native American language. That it shows influence from the environment that they were in.
It's presumably, the Lamanites, they also had some different language path, but then they got incorporated, groups of them at certain points, right, into the
In fact, I wish I had another lifetime or two, and I'd like to study some of those southern in northern South America. Some of those might be Lamanite languages that might have left early on and not been in contact with Nephites since 550 BC or something, and they might show some really interesting stuff. Might show that they a lack of Egyptian. In fact, what I would be curious is if it showed Egyptian or not. If those Lamanite languages did not have Egyptian, that means that the Nephites were borrowing Egyptian into their language, just like academic endeavors in the Middle Ages borrowed Latin into their language. But if there's no Egyptian, then that means it was on the plates, but not really in the spoken language. But if it's in their spoken language too, then hey, maybe there was, maybe some Egyptian was in the spoken. So that can answer a lot of questions if we can identify a strictly Lamanite language family.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would be something like if they're lacking any of the Phoenician stuff, right?
Yeah, right. That also, exactly.
Yeah, you'd say, okay, that was a pre-combination.
Exactly. They left before the mixing with exactly. Yeah, a lot of stuff to be learned from studying those southern languages more.
Yeah, I guess we tried to get BYU to do something, but no effect. Way back when.
Yeah.
Still my hope that we do something, get something set up, an endowment or something somewhere to, look at Witoto or some of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, my website's bmslr.org. So Brian, there's a page that's dedicated to him. Just click on his picture at the bottom, and it's got all his work and videos and stuff. So
yeah, and on Jerry Grover's page there, you can download the large book, the Exploring the Explanatory Power of Semitic and Egyptian in Uto-Aztecan, and that's the big 1658 sets with lots of linguistic explanation. And so it's for linguists and scholars, but hey, a person could wade through it and look through it and find a lot of interesting stuff without being a linguist, if you want to download that from his website.
Thank you. And Keith, you want to go ahead with your question?
Let me intrude first, because as long as Jerry Grover is still available, I want to try to put him on the spot, because we only get to see him on a rare occasion, and it's been a long time since he's given a presentation. And I have an open spot in September 8th. I guess we have next week is review, then we have Ron Smith, then Robert Messick, then I've got the open spot, then Keith Lane, open spots again after that. Any chance, Jerry, that you're going to be available?
That weekend, no, my son's getting married, so I probably wouldn't have time to prepare anything over that weekend, but
Well,
maybe.
September 22 and 28 are also available.
Okay. I'm also going into the hospital for some surgery, so I'm not sure how I'm going to be. But yeah, you just have to tell me, do you want like a super controversial topic or just a tame one?
Let's get people to vote. How many of you would like to see the super controversial topic? Yes. And the tame, yep, okay, I think that wins. We're happy to deal with controversy. Which topic will that be?
Oh, I've got one on the story of Ammon that we've got all incorrect, possibly. And then I've got an explanation of the Tower of Babel. That's kind of interesting. So,
okay. Well, that's one of those topics
Story of
that
Ammon. I'd really love to hear the story of Ammon, Jerry.
well, the Tower of Babel is so far in the midst of our past. I'd certainly be interested in what you have there too.
Hmm.
So yes, you're certainly welcome to come back, and if we can work it out for you in October, if not September, but please, if you're going to be available, please come join us, because your contributions, the fact that you supported Brian and helped him get started is a major benefit to all of us. Thank you for that.
yeah, one other comment there on the website. Now I have all of John Sorensen's work up too now. Everything, I think, found everything. It's all downloadable for free, even Mormon's Codex, that new book, that got permission to put that up.
Wow.
For free.
Say again your website.
It's bmslr.org. It's Book of Mormon Scientific and Linguistic Research. That's what it stands for.
Okay.
You could probably just search Brian Stubbs, Book of Mormon. It should pop up. Or my name and Book of Mormon. It should pop up top of Google.
And for
Thank
all
you.
of you, let me recommend that Jerry Grover has numerous books on there. It's a wealth of remarkable material. His background in geography is extraordinary. It was interesting when he gave the presentation on what happened to create the 3 days of no light at the crucifixion, requiring thereby to have both a volcano and an earthquake going at the same time. And Ed Fonts, who's the lawyer in California, had spent a good deal of time before the judges, and he pointed out that this was a kind of presentation that just was so compelling that very difficult to argue against it. So yeah, Jerry Grover's got a tremendous amount of well-written research there. Strongly recommend it to all of you. Excuse me for the interruption. Now then, let's get back to whoever it was Pat called on.
Keith, was it?
Brian. Mhm.
It was
And then
me.
Terry Walker. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate very much your presentation. And you mentioned at one point that you thought some people came in from the northeast of the U.S. And I was reading some articles and saw some videos of presentations where the speaker thought that, I think it was the Jaredites, came in on the northeast. And in researching some of the archaeological sites along the James River and down into the Great Lakes, they discovered some of the Hopewell Mounds. I think it was Hopewell Mounds. had some ancient writings on it. And the one phrase that stuck with me was Yod Heva. The symbols that they found in those places spelled out that particular phrase, Yod Heva. And I'm wondering if you can expound on that, and then I have another question shortly after that.
Yeah, I don't remember saying that anything came from the Northeast, but yeah, I think there's I think from Central America, some of them went up to the Northeast. Went um, as far as that Yod He Va, yeah, that is interesting. If let's see, that's on the see what do they call this? Is that the Roper Savage collection that's found on? A lot of those, and that's being contested whether it's, there's some that say it's some of those plates have been shown to be modern manufacture, but there's other people that say, yeah, some of them are, but some of them are not. And so if some of them are valid, that's a very interesting thing to look into. And I don't really know myself. I haven't looked into that much, and almost just kind of feel like just continue my research until other specialists more knowledgeable in those areas come to a conclusion. But yeah, and I think Nephites did go northeast from Central America and went up into various areas, and I'm not sure the extent or I just know that Muskogean has some very interesting Lehite language stuff, and Algonquian has some interesting stuff, but not very darn much. If Uto-Aztecan is 60 to 90% Semitic and Egyptian, and Muskogean is 10 to 15%, Algonquian might be 3 or 5%. So it's not enough to even attempt to make a case that would convince anybody, but it's some interesting stuff that we could look at and think about, but not really. Algonquin would not work as proof.
Okay. I did a presentation, what was it, Paul, a couple of months ago maybe, on my trip down to Mexico and the Hill Cumorah. I'm one of those that believe the Hill Cumorah is located in Mexico, and that when Moroni traveled, he went up to the northeastern United States to what is now in New York and Palmyra, around that area, and buried the abridgment there where Joseph Smith found it
Yeah,
by the
I
help
think
of the angel.
I think that's very possible. I kind of think along those lines too, that there was a different one in Mexico somewhere, and that I mean, had 30 or more years to wander around and do his thing.
Yeah, when we climbed that hill, we'd heard all the stories about how they had been stopped, and we were stopped as well. And I'm just wondering if you've had any inclination at all about when all of those original plates might be released to the public to be studied and translated and come to light.
Oh, I have no idea. No, I don't know. I can't even take a guess on that, and I don't know of anyone else that could. That's the Lord's thinking, and it's hard for us to get into His thinking very, unless He wants to let us know. But yeah, good question. I do look forward to the day when some Semitic writings will be discovered in Mexico, and even if they're not Book of Mormon stuff, they'd be made by Book of Mormon peoples, and there should be a lot of them around. they just dig in the right places.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Go ahead, Terry. You're muted. You're muted, Terry.
All righty. I just want to thank Brian for his work. And my background in archaeology is I dealt with things, and I have no idea the language of the people that made those things. So it's nice that the work that you do and the work that Robert does among the Navajo is people out of Blanding have done well. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's good to be appreciated by a few. Sometimes linguists are appreciated by only a few.
I gotta tell you, I took a class in college on linguistics, and they gave us a paragraph from Old English, and our assignment was to decipher it. We had a few words that were common, and we knew what those were, but I don't know that anybody can appreciate until they've been through something like that how difficult it was, because everybody that came back with their assignment done, we all had different answers. Every one of us had something that, they were
Yeah.
tied together loosely, but it was not an easy thing to do. So I can't begin to say how much I value those people that can make sense out of that, because you're right, language does change, and as a result, it becomes very, very difficult to tie it all together. So I applaud you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it is just a lot of work digging in dictionaries and figuring things out.
Mhm.
Any other questions? We've gotten to the end.
Just a comment on, I think there will never be a time when plates are going to be dug up that could only be explained by the Book of Mormon, because that would dramatically change the dynamic of faith. I mean, at that point, the Book of Mormon itself says that if you know something, you have a kind of accountability that you don't have if you believe. And I think the Lord is always going to preserve the Book of Mormon as a matter of faith. And then with these evidences supporting it, but not ever compelling belief. And if they started digging up gold plates with Book of Mormon records all over Central America or someplace else, at that point, belief is compelled rather than chosen. I think, it's like, how would anybody deny it at that point, if just based on science? So I don't think that's how the Book of Mormon thinks about faith, and I suspect we'll never have that kind of proof.
Well, I think your point is well taken, but at the same time, we have the Bible and we have proof of certain books and verses from historical writings and from scrolls that have been found through archaeology, and people still don't believe. So I'm not sure that finding those records would compel a lot of people to believe. There would always be those who would be critical and claim falsehoods and so forth, that they just refuse to accept it.
Well, certainly people can deny even the most obvious things. I mean, there's the Flat Earth Society and the people that think we did never go to the moon. So you're right that one can be incorrigibly unbelieving, but once all the science starts to converge, it becomes very difficult, and faith becomes less operative.
Yeah.
Paul, I have a project I could do, which is the 5 endings that that Moroni wrote for the Book of Mormon. If you're interested in that, you can put me on the schedule at some point.
You have is that second week of September available for you?
What time in September?
That is September 8th.
Well, no, that's not gonna, I'm gonna be in Europe then.
Okay, September 22.
Probably could do it that day.
Okay. And what was the title again?
Moroni's 5 Endings of the Book of Mormon.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate your volunteering. Any of the rest of you would like to claim a spot? While I'm out of my normal circumstances, there's a good chance to get things confused. Monty, you got your hand up for that?
Oh, he had his
Yes,
hand
I
up
do.
earlier.
I was going to say, you don't want to get too worked up about people dissenting your opinions on what you're telling them, because even Jesus himself had people who wouldn't believe him when he preached directly to him. And, when you can turn down the Son of God, who are you going to go to?
That's true. His miracles were well known. The raising of Lazarus from the dead was well known, and they just hated him more. So even
Oh,
with
that was
lots of
fake
evidence,
news. That was all fake news.
Was that your question, Monty?
That was it.
Okay.
oh, was there a question in there? I thought you
I,
were
I didn't
making a
I
comment.
didn't hear one either. That's why I was.
I'm
But
not
it was
smart enough
it was
to
a comment.
ask a really intelligent question here.
It was a comment more than a question, right?
The thing that the scholars are, the thing where the doubt comes in about those kinds of New Testament accounts is, if you listen to what the scholars say, they say that the Gospels, the first Gospel written was Mark, and it was written like 60, 70 years after the fact. And for instance, you'll have things like parts of John don't exactly converge. When was the temple cleansed? Was it early in Jesus' ministry or late? So what the skeptics would say is the New Testament was documents are composed quite a bit later. Even the earliest stuff is Paul's letters. That's what they say. I don't know. I'm not endorsing that view, but the account that's given in the the account that's given there is those, we don't actually have any manuscripts from 30 AD. If we dug those up, that would be the equivalent of finding a contemporary Book of Mormon text. So even with the New Testament, you still have to exercise faith. And some of the people that study this lose their faith because of these sort of faithless reconstructions of what the New Testament is.
Well, we're approaching 10:30 at my time, and I do have a chance to move on again tomorrow. So, unless I see another hand, I'm going to sing, and I've chosen to sing a little, just one verse. We limit not the truth of God to our poor reach of mind, by notions of our day and sect, crude, partial, and confined. No, let us new and better hope within our hearts be stirred. The Lord hath yet more light and truth to break forth from his word. The Lord hath more light and truth to break from. Oh, wow. And thank you, Brian, for bringing the words to us that help us to look back to at the fascicular cognates and recognize that there is in the mind of God the whole wealth of our languages and all of their changes. What an
Hey,
awesome
thank you.
combination that is.
Thank
You
you.
all.
Enjoyable evening.
Thank you all, and good night. And next week we have the review of the previous 8. So hopefully, Brian, you can come back for a 5-minute review on that one. And
Okay.
then, yeah, we'll hope to get the previous 8. However, Robert isn't here tonight to be reminded. So, Pat, you may get to pick up on that one. And thank you, Pat. Thank you, Pat,
Sure.
for for doing a good job on the introduction for me. I appreciate it and appreciate